The silence stretched on so long it felt like time itself had stopped. My father sat slumped on the couch, staring at the floor, his hands trembling in his lap. My mother finally sank into the armchair again, her face pale and drawn, her eyes glassy. "What are you going to do?" she whispered after a long time. I didn't know how to answer. I didn't have a plan. I barely had a thought left in my head beyond the pounding of my heartbeat. "I don't know," I said finally, my voice cracking. "I tried to call him. He's not answering. I went to his apartment. He's gone." My mother pressed her fingers to her temples, like she could physically hold herself together. "Oh, Maya." My father let out a bitter laugh that made me flinch. "Of course he's gone. Boys like that don't stick around, not when it's inconvenient. Especially not when they're Hendersons." "Marcus," my mother said again, but even she sounded tired now, her voice more plea than protest. He stood up and began pacing. "You don't understand, Clara. They'll make an example out of us. You think Henderson will let this kind of scandal touch his precious family? He'll cover it up, and we'll be the ones who pay the price. I'll lose my job. You," he pointed at me, shaking. "You'll lose everything." "I already have," I whispered. That stopped him. For a moment, his face softened, but only for a moment. Then he turned away. "Go to your room," he said quietly. "We'll talk about this in the morning." "But—" "Go," he said, louder this time, his voice like a door slamming shut. I went. Upstairs, I collapsed on my bed and buried my face in my pillow, the sobs shaking my whole body. I wanted to disappear. To wake up and find out this was all some horrible dream. But the ache in my stomach, the queasy roll of nausea, the weight of everything pressing down on my chest, none of it was a dream. The next morning, my father didn't speak to me at all. He left early for work, without so much as a glance in my direction. My mother made me tea but couldn't meet my eyes either. Every sound in the house felt too loud. The clink of a spoon, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock counting down the seconds of our unraveling lives. I tried to go about my day like normal, but normal didn't exist anymore. I kept checking my phone, refreshing my messages, hoping, praying, for something from Timothy. A text. A call. Anything. But there was nothing. By the third day, my father came home looking more hollow than I'd ever seen him. He didn't even take off his jacket before he spoke. "They know," he said flatly. My mother looked up sharply. "Who knows?" "The company. The Hendersons." Word got around. My stomach dropped. "How?" He didn't answer right away. His jaw clenched. "I was called into the executive office this afternoon. Mr. Henderson himself wanted to speak with me." The room went completely still. "What did he say?" my mother asked quietly. He looked at me then, and I wished he hadn't. There was no anger left in his eyes anymore, only defeat. He said my services are no longer required. The air left my lungs. "They fired you?" He nodded. "Effective immediately. Security escorted me out." My mother gasped. "Marcus." "They made sure everyone saw," he said, his voice shaking with shame. 20 years, Clara. 20 years, and they threw me out like I was nothing." Tears burned my eyes. "Dad, I'm so sorry." "Don't," he said, cutting me off. His voice was quiet, but it hit harder than shouting ever could. "Don't apologize. It won't fix this." He walked past me and into the bedroom, closing the door behind him. And just like that, the sound of the latch clicking was the sound of my world falling apart completely. That night, the house was silent. Not peaceful silent, heavy silent, the kind that pressed against the walls and made every breath sound like an intrusion. My father didn't come out of the bedroom. I heard the low murmur of my mother's voice through the door, trying to comfort him, trying to make sense of something that couldn't be made sense of. I sat on the floor of my room, hugging my knees, staring at my phone. Still no word from Timothy. I checked every possible place, his old number, his work email, his social media accounts. Everything was gone. Deleted. Like he'd never existed at all. By morning, my mother's eyes were red and swollen. My father left again, early, without saying where he was going. When he came back in the afternoon, His face was pale, his expression grim. "They blacklisted me," he said simply. My mother looked up from the kitchen table. "What?" I tried calling old colleagues, friends, anyone who might have a lead. "No one will touch me. They all know Henderson's behind it." He let out a bitter laugh. One man even told me, off the record, that they were warned not to associate with me. My stomach twisted. "That's not fair." He looked at me, tired eyes meeting mine. "Life stopped being fair the second you got involved with that boy." The word stung, but I didn't argue. I couldn't. Because he wasn't wrong. In the weeks that followed, everything started to fall apart. Bills piled up. My father stopped going out altogether. My mother picked up extra shifts at the clinic, trying to hold things together. And me, I just drifted. Every time I looked in the mirror, my body looked a little different. The small swell of my stomach was impossible to ignore now. I'd started wearing loose sweaters, even though it was late August and the heat was suffocating. At work, the whispers started. I didn't know how, but people knew. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe someone from HR had said something. Or maybe it was just the way gossip travels in offices like wildfire. I caught fragments when I passed by groups in the hallway. "Did you hear? She's the one, right? God, imagine the nerve." No one said it to my face, but they didn't have to. The looks said enough. I stopped eating lunch in the break room. Stopped talking to anyone except when absolutely necessary. The office that once felt like a step toward my future now felt like a cage, each fluorescent light flickering judgment down on me. And still, nothing from Timothy. One afternoon, as I was packing up to leave, someone called my name softly. "Maya." I turned. It was Rebecca, one of the senior analysts. She was kind, at least she used to be. Her eyes were full of something that looked like pity now. "Can I talk to you for a second?" she asked gently. I nodded, following her into one of the smaller meeting rooms. She closed the door behind us. "Listen," she began carefully, "I shouldn't even be telling you this, but you need to know." My stomach dropped. "Know what?" She hesitated, glancing around as if someone might be listening. "They're going to let you go." I blinked. "What?" "They're calling it downsizing," she said quietly, "but everyone knows why. HR got the order this morning. It came from the top." I felt dizzy. "From the top? You mean from Mr. Henderson?" She gave a sad little shrug. "I'm sorry, Maya. You didn't hear it from me." I sank into the chair, numb. First my father. Now me. The Hendersons were erasing us, one by one. When I got home that night, my father was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of unpaid bills. My mother was washing dishes in silence. "They're firing me," I said softly. Neither of them reacted. My father just gave a short, hollow laugh. "Of course they are." For a long time, none of us said anything. Finally, my mother turned from the sink, drying her hands on a towel. Her face looked older than I'd ever seen it. "Maya," she said quietly, "you need to start thinking about what you're going to do. About the baby." The baby. It still felt unreal every time someone said it out loud. "I don't know," I whispered. "Do you want to keep it?" she asked carefully. I looked at her, my throat tight. "I don't know. I can't think about that right now. Everything's falling apart." My father stood up suddenly, pushing his chair back so hard it scraped the floor. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you ruined us." "Marcus," my mother snapped. But he was already walking away, his shoulders slumped, his voice breaking. "I can't do this anymore." The door slammed behind him, and I sank to the floor, sobbing. My mother knelt beside me, pulling me into her arms. "We'll get through this," she whispered, though I could hear the tremor in her voice. "Somehow we will." But as I sat there, my face buried in her shoulder, I wasn't sure I believed her. Because Timothy was gone. My father was broken. And the world I thought I understood had vanished. All that was left was the sound of my mother's heartbeat against my ear, and the faint, fragile pulse of another heartbeat growing inside me. The days after my father walked out blurred together. He stayed away for 3 nights. When he finally came back, he looked hollowed out, eyes sunken, voice flat. He didn't say a word to me. Not one. The silence in our house was unbearable. Every sound felt magnified. The creak of the stairs, the drip of the kitchen faucet, the hum of the refrigerator. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Timothy's face. His laugh. His hand brushing through his hair. The way he'd said, "No matter what happens, what we have is real." But if it was real, why did he disappear? I needed answers. So one morning, I took the bus downtown to Henderson and Associates. I wasn't even sure what I was going to do. What could I possibly say to the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the city? "Hi, your son got me pregnant and then vanished?" But sitting at home, drowning in silence and fear, was worse. When I stepped into the lobby, everything looked the same as it had before. The marble floors still gleamed. The receptionist still smiled the same polite, empty smile. But to me, it all felt different, colder, sharper. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked. "I need to speak to Mr. Henderson," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She frowned. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's important. It's about his son." That made her pause. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, before she picked up the phone and spoke quietly into it. "Wait over there, please," she said, pointing to one of the chairs near the elevators. I sat down, my hands shaking in my lap. The minutes stretched. I almost convinced myself to leave when the elevator dinged and a tall man in a gray suit stepped out. He looked exactly like Timothy, older, sharper around the edges, but the same piercing blue eyes. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Miss," he began, glancing at the receptionist. "Collins," she supplied. "Miss Collins," he said, turning to me. "I'm Robert Henderson. You wanted to speak with me about my son." My throat went dry. "Yes, sir. Come with me." I followed him into the elevator, then down a long hallway lined with glass offices. Everything was silent except the click of his shoes on the tile. He opened a door at the end of the hall and gestured for me to enter. The office was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a sleek desk, and a single photo on the shelf behind him. Timothy, smiling next to a woman who must have been his mother. I swallowed hard. I used to work here. Over the summer. "I know," he said calmly, sitting behind his desk. "You're Marcus and Evelyn Collins' daughter." The way he said it, not asked, but stated, made my skin crawl. "Yes," I whispered. He folded his hands. "And you're here about Timothy?" I nodded. I need to know what happened." He disappeared. He changed his number, moved out of his apartment. No one's heard from him. I deserve to know where he went. Mr. Henderson studied me for a long, silent moment. His expression didn't change, but his eyes. There was something cold in them. Calculating. "You were close to my son," he said finally. "Yes," I said softly. I loved him." He let out a slow sigh, leaning back in his chair. "Miss Collins, Timothy is overseas. I sent him to London last month for an executive development program. He won't be returning for quite some time." The words hit me like ice water. "You sent him?" He nodded, his voice still calm, too calm. "My son was distracted, unfocused. It was necessary to give him a fresh start." My stomach turned. Did he even know about me? He looked me dead in the eye. Of course he knew. I felt my knees go weak. Then why didn't he say anything? Why didn't he call me? I've been trying to reach him for weeks. "Because that chapter of his life is closed," Mr. Henderson interrupted, his tone final. "And you would be wise to close it as well." I stared at him, stunned. "You can't just make him disappear. He's the father of my child." For the first time, his expression cracked, not with shock, but with quiet, measured fury. "Miss Collins," he said slowly, "I am aware of your situation. And let me be perfectly clear. If you value your family's future, you will not speak of this again." Tears burned my eyes. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm offering you a choice," he said. "End this. Walk away. We'll ensure your parents' debts are taken care of. A small settlement will be arranged. But if you pursue this, if you go to the press or to my son, I promise you, I will make certain no one in this city will hire your father again. Or you." The room spun. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. His voice was too calm, too certain, like someone used to getting exactly what he wanted. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Finally, I turned toward the door. "You can't buy me," I whispered. He smiled thinly. "Everyone has a price, Miss Collins. You'll learn that soon enough." I left without another word. By the time I stepped out of the building, the city lights had started to blur. I didn't even realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my lips. I'd come looking for answers. What I found was the truth. Timothy hadn't abandoned me. He'd been taken, silenced by the same power that now hovered over me like a shadow. But as I stood there on the sidewalk, one hand instinctively moving to my belly, I made myself a promise. They might control everything now. But one day, I'll make sure they don't. I don't remember how I got home that night. I must have taken the bus, but everything after I stepped out of Henderson and Associates was a blur. The world looked the same, the streets, the buildings, the people rushing by, but it all felt hollow. I felt hollow. When I walked through the front door, my mother was sitting at the kitchen table. She looked up from her tea, her eyes soft but weary. "Maya," she said quietly, "where have you been?" I couldn't speak. I just stood there, trembling. She got up and came over to me, taking one look at my face before she pulled me into her arms. "What happened?" she whispered. And I told her everything, about Mr. Henderson, about Timothy, about the threats, about the way he looked at me like I was something disposable. When I was done, she didn't say anything for a long time. She just held me tighter. Finally, she pulled back, her eyes glistening. "You can't tell your father," she said softly. "Not yet." "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Because it'll destroy him," she said. "He already blames himself. And if he finds out that Henderson threatened you, he might do something foolish. Something we can't undo." I nodded, though it felt like swallowing fire. Keeping secrets was what had gotten me here in the first place. But what choice did I have? That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, one hand on my stomach. There was a heartbeat inside me now, a tiny, fragile thing depending on me to be strong. So I decided I would be. The next few weeks were quiet. My father barely spoke to me. He went to work, came home, ate dinner in silence. My mother tiptoed around us, trying to keep the peace. I went to my doctor's appointments alone. Paid for them with the last of my savings. Every time I saw the little flicker of a heartbeat on the monitor, I felt something stir inside me. Hope, fear, love, all tangled together. But the world didn't stop. It moved on, cruelly indifferent. Then one afternoon, as I was leaving the clinic, a woman approached me in the parking lot. "Maya Collins?" she asked. She was in her 30s, dressed sharply, with a press badge clipped to her jacket. "Yes," I said warily. She smiled faintly. "My name's Rachel Green. I'm an investigative journalist with the City Ledger. I was hoping we could talk." I froze. "About what?" "About Timothy Henderson," she said. My heart stuttered. I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do," she said gently. "You've been seen at the Henderson building. And I have reason to believe Mr. Henderson Sr. is paying off several employees to keep quiet about something involving his son." The world tilted. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're not the first person the Hendersons have tried to silence," Rachel said. "And if what I think is true, you might finally be the one who can stop them." I didn't agree to talk to her right away. Part of me still believed that if I just stayed quiet, it would all blow over. That I could protect my family by disappearing into the background. But then the envelope arrived. No return address, no note, just a thick white envelope slipped under our front door one morning. Inside was a check. $50,000. And a single typed line on a folded sheet of paper. "For your discretion. R.H." My hands shook as I stared at it. My mother walked in, saw my face, and went pale. "What is that?" she asked. I handed it to her wordlessly. She looked at the check, then the note, then at me. Oh my God! I could feel something rising in my chest, not fear this time, but anger. Pure, sharp, unfiltered anger. They think they can buy me, I said quietly. Like I'm just another problem to make disappear. Maya. No, I said louder now. No more hiding. No more being scared. They took everything from me. From us. I'm not taking their money. I picked up the phone and called Rachel Green. This is Maya Collins, I said when she answered. I'll talk. We met at a quiet diner on the edge of town. Rachel came with a recorder, a notebook, and a look of fierce determination. Start from the beginning, she said. So I did. I told her about working at Henderson and Associates. About Timothy, how we met, how we fell in love, how he disappeared. About the pregnancy. About my meeting with Robert Henderson. Rachel listened without interrupting, only asking questions to clarify details. When I was done, she looked at me with something like respect. You're brave, she said softly. You know they'll come after you for this. I know, I said. But I can't let them control the story anymore. She nodded. Good. Because I think you're about to expose something much bigger than you realize. 3 days later, the City Ledger ran the headline. Heir apparent or hidden scandal. The Henderson Empire's secret cover-up. The article didn't name me, but it didn't have to. Inside, it detailed financial hush payments, questionable corporate ethics, and the sudden disappearance of the CEO's son following a private family incident. The fallout was immediate. News vans parked outside Henderson and Associates. Reporters swarmed the lobby. My father came home early that day, his face white as paper. Maya, he said quietly, what did you do? I looked at him, tears in my eyes but my chin high. I told the truth. He sank onto the couch, rubbing his face. You don't understand. Henderson called me this morning. He knows. I sat beside him, gripping his hand. He's not going to control us anymore, Dad. He looked at me for a long time, the fear in his eyes giving way to something else. Pride. You're your mother's daughter, he murmured. God help them. The article spread faster than anyone expected. By noon, it wasn't just in the City Ledger. It was on every news site, every social feed, every whispered conversation at coffee shops across the city. By evening, reporters were camping outside the Henderson estate. The company issued a carefully worded statement calling the article an unfounded attack on a reputable family. But people weren't buying it. That night, as rain tapped against my window, my phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello. Maya. The voice froze me. I hadn't heard it in months, but I would have known it anywhere. Timothy, I whispered. There was silence on the line, the kind that hums between two people who've both been broken in different ways. I saw the article, he said finally. I came back as soon as I could. I swallowed hard. So it's true then? You left because of your father. I didn't leave, he said. He sent me away. I didn't even know you tried to reach me until it was too late. They took my phone, cut me off from everything. He said it was to protect the family. To protect the company. My hand tightened on the phone. And what about me? I thought you wanted nothing to do with me, he said softly. He showed me emails, messages, things that made it look like you'd moved on. My heart twisted. He lied to both of us. Yes, Timothy said. He did. And now he's paying for it. There was another pause, longer this time. Then his voice broke. Maya, is it true? About the baby? I closed my eyes. Yes. He exhaled sharply, like the air had been knocked out of him. My God. She's mine, I said quietly. No one else's. I won't let them use her as another bargaining chip. Timothy's voice was trembling now. I don't care about the money, the company, any of it. I just want to see you. Please. I hesitated. Where? The park near your old apartment, he said. Tomorrow at noon. I almost didn't go. Part of me still didn't trust him, or myself. But something deeper pulled me there the next day, the same instinct that had once made me believe in him before everything fell apart. When I reached the park, he was already there, standing under the same oak tree where we'd met for lunch countless times before. He looked different now, older, tired, his hair longer, his suit wrinkled from travel. But when he saw me, his expression softened like no time had passed. "Maya," he said, stepping forward. I froze. "Don't." He stopped. "You have every right to hate me." "I don't hate you," I said. "I just don't know who you are anymore." "I'm still me," he said, voice low. "The man who loved you. The one who wanted a life with you." "You let your father destroy that," I said. "I didn't know he did," he replied, eyes wet. "But I swear to you, I'm going to fix it." "Fix it?" I let out a broken laugh. "Timothy, there's no fixing this. I lost my job. My father almost lost his. My family," my voice cracked. "We were humiliated." He took a slow step closer. "Then let me stand beside you now. Let me take the fall that should have been mine." The sincerity in his voice hit me like a wave. For the first time in months, I saw not the heir or the Henderson, but the man I had once loved. But love wasn't enough anymore. "I don't want revenge, Timothy," I said quietly. "I just want peace. For me. For her." He nodded slowly. "Then that's what I'll give you." 2 weeks later, the Henderson board released an official statement. Timothy Henderson resigns from the company, citing personal misconduct and conflict of interest. Reporters called it the fall of a golden boy. But I didn't see it that way. I saw a man finally telling the truth, even when it cost him everything. He came to see me once more after that, at a small cafe near the river. He brought flowers, not roses, but wild daisies. "For new beginnings," he said. We talked for hours, about the past, the lies, the child we would one day raise with honesty instead of shame. There was still pain between us, but something gentle too, like forgiveness learning to breathe again. As the sun set over the river, he reached across the table and took my hand. "I don't know what the future looks like," he said. "But if you'll let me, I want to be part of it. Every day. Every step." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I saw not the man who had broken me, but the one trying to rebuild what he'd lost. "Then start by earning it," I said softly. He nodded. "I will." And just like that, life began again, slowly, quietly, imperfectly. Not as a fairy tale, but as something real. I had been silenced, shamed, and shattered. But in the end, I told my story. And sometimes, that's where healing truly begins. 3 years later, the world had moved on, or at least, that's what it looked like on the surface. The scandal that once consumed every headline had become a faded story in the archives of forgotten gossip. But some things never faded. My daughter, Emma, was 2.5 now, bright-eyed, curious, and far too clever for her age. Every time she smiled, I saw him. The same dark eyes, the same wayward grin. After the article, after the resignation, I left the city. I'd moved into a small town on the coast, a quiet place where nobody cared who the Hendersons were or what their son had done. I found work at a community outreach center, helping young women rebuild their lives after job loss or abuse. In helping them, I began to heal myself. Every few months, Timothy sent letters. No promises, no pleading, just updates. He'd started a non-profit for corporate accountability. He worked with whistleblowers, with interns like I once was, with people whose voices had been silenced by fear. He never asked to visit, never demanded forgiveness. He just stayed present in quiet ways. Then, one morning in early spring, a letter arrived in handwriting I didn't recognize. It wasn't from Timothy. "Mr. Robert Henderson is ill," it began. "He has asked to see you." I read the line 3 times before the meaning sank in. Robert Henderson, the man who had destroyed everything I'd known, wanted to see me. My first instinct was to tear the letter apart. But something stopped me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but curiosity. Why now? That weekend, I left Emma with my parents and took the train back to the city I'd sworn never to return to. The Henderson estate was quieter than I remembered. No reporters, no security, no life in the windows. Inside, The house smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain. I found him in the study, the same room where he'd once signed contracts worth millions. He looked nothing like the man I remembered. Thinner, smaller. The fire that once burned behind his eyes had dimmed. "Maya," he said weakly, his voice rasping like paper. "You came." I stood by the doorway, my arms crossed. "You asked." He smiled faintly. Still strong. Just like before. "Why did you call me here?" I asked. He gestured for me to sit. "Because I need to say what I should have said years ago." I didn't move. He sighed. "I destroyed your life. I did it because I was afraid. Afraid of scandal, of weakness, of losing control. But in the end, control is the only thing I truly lost." His words hung heavy in the air. "I watched my son walk away from everything," he continued. "And for what? Pride. Legacy. The company I built doesn't even bear my name anymore. They forced me out. And in all that noise, the only voice I keep hearing is yours. The one that spoke truth." I stared at him. "You ruined my family. My father nearly lost his job. My life fell apart." "I know," he said. "And I can't undo that. But I want to make things right, in whatever time I have left." He slid an envelope across the table. "I've transferred funds to your foundation," he said. "It's not a bribe, it's restitution. Use it to help others. Do what I couldn't." I didn't touch the envelope. "You think money can fix this?" He shook his head. "No. But maybe it can build something better than my name ever did." For a long moment, I said nothing. I just looked at him, a man who'd once held the city in his palm, now trembling in a quiet room, trying to be human again. Finally, I whispered, "I forgive you. Not for you. For me." He closed his eyes. "That's more than I deserve." When I left the estate, the air outside felt different, lighter, almost. Not because everything was healed, but because I no longer carried the weight alone. Timothy met me at the train station later that evening. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't need to. He just held my hand, and for the first time in years, I let him. We watched the city lights flicker beyond the glass. Once, they had been symbols of power and fear. Now, they were just lights, distant, harmless, almost beautiful. That night, as the train moved toward home, I looked out the window and saw our reflection, his hand resting on mine, my daughter's photo tucked in my bag, and a faint hope flickering between us. Maybe we couldn't rewrite the past. But we could live differently. Honestly. Bravely. Together. 10 years later. The world had changed again. Or maybe it was me who had changed enough to finally see it differently. Our little coastal town had become home, the kind of place where the baker knows your coffee order, and the librarian saves new books for your daughter. Emma was 11 now. All legs and questions, with a mind sharp enough to undo any adult's excuse. She had his eyes. Every time she laughed, I saw the ghost of a boy who once promised me forever under a canopy of city lights. But she was mine, utterly, fiercely mine. And that was enough. The foundation had grown more than I'd ever imagined. We called it Second Chance Works, a community-based initiative for women rebuilding their lives after workplace harassment, economic hardship, or corporate abuse. It started as a handful of volunteers. Now it had 5 centers across the region. People came to us broken, angry, ashamed, the same way I once came to myself. We gave them training, shelter, legal aid, dignity. We told them, "You are not what happened to you." That line became our mantra. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a mistake that needed to be erased. I felt like something had bloomed from the ashes. Timothy still worked in advocacy. We didn't live together, not yet. Our love had grown older, quieter, more honest. He visited often, to see Emma, to help with projects, to sit beside me on long drives where we said everything and nothing at all. He was no longer the man I'd met in that car on the overlook. He'd become gentler, humbler, someone who'd learned how to lose, and what that loss could teach him. Sometimes, I'd catch him watching Emma, not with guilt, but with awe. He never tried to be the father who was absent. He became the one who showed up now, in every small way that mattered. And somehow, that was enough for her. One afternoon in early spring, Emma found an old newspaper clipping in one of my drawers. It was yellowed, edges curling, but the headline was still bold. CEO's son scandal rocks Henderson and Associates. She walked into the kitchen, holding it up. "Mom," she said, "was this about you?" The world seemed to tilt for a second. I'd always known this day would come. I set down the mug in my hands. "Where did you find that?" "In your desk. I was doing a project on media bias." Her tone was curious, not accusing, like she was looking for a missing piece of a puzzle. I nodded slowly. "Yes. It was about me. And about your dad." She blinked. "Dad." The word hit me with both warmth and ache. I sat her down, took a breath, and told her everything. Not the tabloid version, not the whispered rumor, but the truth. How two people fell in love where they shouldn't have. How fear and power tore everything apart. And how, in the ruins of that, something good still grew. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said softly, "So you didn't give up. You built something instead." Tears pricked my eyes. "I had to." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, the same gesture Timothy once gave me under the stars. "I'm glad you did," she whispered. That summer, she visited the city for the first time. Timothy took her to the overlook where we once sat. She came back that evening full of stories, about the skyline, the wind, and how her dad told her the stars were brighter when you have something to hope for. When she fell asleep that night, I stood by her door for a long time, watching her breathe, this child who carried the blood of power and the heart of resilience. Maybe one day, she would inherit the foundation. Maybe she would lead it further than I ever could. But tonight, she was just my girl, dreaming, unburdened by the sins of the past. And as the waves whispered outside and the house hummed softly with night sounds, I realized something simple, something final. The story had never been about the fall. It had always been about what grew after the fire. And the courage to plant again. The city skyline hadn't changed much. Still the same glittering sprawl of glass and ambition, still pretending to touch the stars. But Emma had. At 22, she was fire-wrapped in calm, confident, articulate, and unafraid to ask questions that made older men shift in their seats. She was finishing her degree in social entrepreneurship, and she had just been accepted for an internship at Henderson and Associates. Yes, that Henderson and Associates. When she told me, I felt the air leave my lungs. "Are you sure about this?" I asked quietly. She smiled. "Mom, it's just an internship. I want to see it for myself, how things work at the top." I wanted to tell her everything, every memory, every bruise that building had left on my life, but I didn't. Because she wasn't me. And because the only thing I feared more than her going back there was stopping her from becoming who she was meant to be. The first week, she called every night. She talked about the glossy hallways, the expensive coffee, the silent hierarchy that still pulsed through the place. And she told me something else, something that made my heart twist in ways I couldn't name. "Everyone treats me differently," she said. "Like they already know who I am, but they're not sure what to say." I closed my eyes. Of course they knew. The city never really forgets. But Emma didn't carry that weight the way I once did. She wore it like armor. A month later, she came home one weekend with a folder full of papers. "Mom, look at this," she said, spreading them across the table. "They've been using shell subsidiaries to cover labor violations overseas. Unpaid workers, unsafe factories. It's all right here in the reports." The name at the bottom of every signature line made my blood run cold. Robert Henderson. Timothy's father. The same man who once buried my existence under legal threats and whispered shame. "Emma," I said, my voice shaking, "you can't." "Can't what?" she interrupted softly. "Speak up. You raised me to stand for what's right. You built a foundation on that." She looked at me then with those same eyes, his eyes, but fiercer, clearer. "Mom, I'm not trying to destroy anyone. I just want the truth out there." And in that moment, I realized something. All the years I'd spent trying to protect her from the past hadn't erased it. They'd prepared her to face it. It was late August when she asked to meet him. Timothy hadn't set foot in his father's building in nearly a decade. But when Emma called, saying she wanted to understand what legacy really means, he agreed. They met in the CEO's office, 3 generations of Henderson history colliding like quiet thunder. Emma stood tall as she spoke, explaining the reports, the discrepancies, the lives being hurt under their watch. She didn't accuse. She invited accountability. And when Robert Henderson looked at her, at his granddaughter, something in his face broke. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, in a voice cracked by years of pride and silence, "You sound just like your mother." Timothy reached for Emma's shoulder then, his eyes shining. Maybe that was the real beginning. Not the scandal, not the pain, but this moment where truth finally stood in the same room as power. Weeks later, Henderson and Associates announced a sweeping reform initiative: independent audits, worker protections, environmental reinvestment programs. They called it the Maya Directive. I found out through the news. I cried quietly in my office, not because I wanted credit, but because the name meant they hadn't erased me after all. That night, Emma came home, tired but glowing. She sat beside me on the porch, our hands brushing, the air thick with the hum of crickets and salt. "Do you think people can really change?" she asked. I thought of the man who'd once vanished, the one who came back to build something better beside me. I thought of her, the living proof of everything that could grow from ruin. "Yes," I said softly. "But only if they're brave enough to face what they've broken." She nodded, resting her head on my shoulder. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel like my story was a wound that needed healing. It was a seed. And my daughter had made it bloom. The media storm around the Maya Directive didn't fade. If anything, it grew. Headlines, interviews, corporate think pieces dissecting the Henderson transformation. But Emma stayed out of the spotlight. She wasn't interested in fame. She wanted change. She graduated that spring, top of her class, with a capstone project that would soon redefine her generation's sense of purpose. Her thesis was called Ethics as Inheritance. It wasn't just a paper. It was a manifesto. "We inherit power, wealth, and reputation," she wrote, "but we also inherit silence, the silence that sustains harm. Breaking that silence is the truest act of legacy." Her words spread across universities, policy circles, and social media. Within months, she was invited to conferences, panels, and youth forums across the country. But she didn't forget where she came from. One late evening, I found her sitting on the living room floor surrounded by notes, design sketches, and folded letters. "What are you building now?" I asked, smiling. She looked up, eyes bright with that same determined fire I used to see in Timothy when he was younger. "Something called the Lumen Initiative," she said. "A partnership platform between corporations, students, and local communities. It's about transparency, sustainable reform, giving people the tools to hold their institutions accountable." "Lumen?" I asked. "It means light," she said simply. "Because if we don't shine light into the places that scare us, they never change." Months passed, and the Lumen Initiative grew faster than any of us could have imagined. Universities signed on. Small businesses joined. Even Henderson and Associates committed to sponsoring their first international summit. But Emma wasn't interested in just the big names. She traveled to local schools, community centers, even small towns that had been forgotten by corporate promises. One day, she called me from Nairobi. Her voice was crackling through a poor connection, but her excitement carried clear. "Mom, we just opened a youth-led regenerative design lab. They're working on solar-powered cooling systems for rural farms." And for the first time, I realized my daughter wasn't just rewriting the Henderson name. She was rewriting what it meant to lead. When she came home that winter, she brought someone with her. Timothy. It had been years since I'd seen him, not since Emma was in high school. His hair was streaked with gray now, his face lined with quiet years of reflection. But his eyes softened when he saw me, and in that look, I recognized the boy who once whispered, "What we have is real." He approached slowly, holding a small envelope. "For you," he said. Inside was a letter, simple, unadorned. His handwriting was still the same. "Maya, I've spent half my life trying to atone for the half I spent running." Watching Emma, I finally understood. Love doesn't disappear when it's buried. It grows roots. It becomes the reason you change. If you can forgive me, I don't need anything else. But if not, thank you for giving the world the brightest part of both of us. Timothy. I didn't say anything for a long time. There was too much between us, too many ghosts, too many years. But when I looked up, I saw him watching Emma laugh through the window, her hands moving as she told a story. And I knew forgiveness wasn't something I had to give. It had already been written, in her, in what she'd built, in who she'd become. That spring, the Lumen Initiative launched its first international network. 100 campuses, 50 cities, 20 corporations, one purpose, accountability with empathy. Emma stood on stage at the summit, thousands of people watching, students, executives, activists, even heads of state. She looked into the lights and said, "My story began with a secret. It became a scandal. But today, it's a seed, and this is what it grew into. We can't undo what was broken. But we can decide what grows in its place." The crowd rose to their feet. I stood in the back, tears slipping down my cheeks, knowing that the little girl I once held through sleepless nights had become the kind of woman who could hold the world accountable and heal it at the same time. That night, as fireworks bloomed over the river, Timothy came to stand beside me. "She's extraordinary," he said softly. "She is," I whispered. "She always was." He turned to me. "And you, Maya, you built the future by surviving the past." For once, I didn't argue. I just watched the sky, bright with color, knowing that for the first time in decades, the light didn't hurt anymore. This is not the end. Type episode 3 in the comments if you want us to continue. And if you have enjoyed watching this video, please show this channel some love by giving this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't done so by now. Thank you besties for always sticking around. See you in the next one.